A sneak peek at what's coming up next.
Dildo.
Yeah,
it's funny. Get it? Get it?
Like,
it's a toy that people put in their bodies. Get it?
Exactly. So like when
it's a piece of silicone. It looks like a penis.
Well,
Get it?
They have PTSD and there's nothing they can do about it. They're just going to be broken the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so sad because there is stuff that you can do about PTSD. And there are a lot of people who have
drugs.
Oh, Jesus.
Somebody posted a picture. There's this picture going on online about the pink dolphin that was spotted. It's like a rare pink dolphin.
Oh, yeah?
Pink dolphins are rare.
Cool.
Somebody took a picture of a pink dolphin in Florida. And I commented and I said, we get it. You're gay. I know it's June, but does every aquatic mammal have to just shove it in our faces? And then I put...
Well, sometimes you got to let people fail. You got to let people make mistakes. Sometimes you got to relinquish a little bit of control and know it's not going to be up to how good you would do it. Me and you need to start getting used to saying the word trauma because we both have it and we both have a lot of it.
Can we get used to trauma?
Yes,
like watch
trauma.
Tromeo and Juliet.
Dude, I used to
Toxic
love,
Avenger.
Yeah, that was my favorite one of them, man. I used to love the trauma films. You cannot help other people before you help yourself. Because of that, you have to help you first. So I obviously come from everything.
I think
from
the biggest thing that people should do in general.
Yeah.
And it will help with self-sabotaging, but it will help with anything in your life, is to take time to actually self-reflect. And people don't do that.
Makes good quality of life.
So,
supposedly.
Welcome to On the Spectrum podcast. Today we're going to talk about pee-pee poo-poo and poo-poo pee-pee.
Welcome to On the Spectrum podcast. My name is Nick.
And I'm pee-pee poo-poo.
And he's Steve. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the podcast. And if you've been listening to us from day one, well, you're a marathoner. Good for you. Thank you for that. As I always start off the episode with, me and Steve do not presume to be experts of anything whatsoever other than our own lives, which means we're going to give some opinions, and those opinions may or may not be the most well-informed, educated opinions ever. But in that's where you, the audience, kind of come in, and you can kind of share your information, and we can have a discussion about it. If you hear something in the episode, either this episode or any other episode, and you want to comment on it or correct us or add information to it, please drop some feedback, give us a comment, whatever. Contact us directly and be like, you guys should probably point out the fact that you were wrong. Whatever you feel like doing. But anyway.
Yes, now that everyone knows there were uninformed idiots.
No, and it's not that. I just don't want anybody to assume.
No, it's just because you said our opinions may not be well informed.
Oh,
makes it sound like we're just talking out of our ass all the time.
Oh. So we
actually do read about stuff.
Yeah, we actually do look up every topic.
It doesn't. What he's trying to say is that we'll occasionally say things that maybe we haven't read too deeply into.
Right.
But we usually try to not. We try to avoid topics that we haven't really looked into ourselves.
And we do look up every topic.
It also doesn't mean that we're not experts in those topics, but we might have a surface level knowledge or a little deeper than surface level on some topics.
Yeah, quite often. And thank you, Steve, for that, because I don't think I could have rambled for 10 minutes and gotten as concise and clear as that. So I didn't want anybody to believe that I was trying to say we're just dumb and don't listen to us. We do read a bit about the topics, but obviously we are not, we haven't spent years and years and years about reading on any of this. But for today, this is actually a topic that I do have not only experience with, because I think all human beings have experience with, and I think people in the autism community get kind of caught up in this quite a bit. But also I do have some education behind this as well. And when I was a counselor, I used to talk about this a lot. Our topic for today is self-sabotaging behavior, or just self-sabotage. And the reason why this is kind of an important topic, and you might be saying to yourself, well, yeah, everybody self-sabotages themselves. Because yes, they do. But it's the types of self-sabotage that we do to ourselves, as well as just in general understanding what the concept is. Because self-sabotaging, people understand the more extreme versions of it, but there are nuanced versions of self-sabotage, and there are things that we do that we say to ourselves are out of protection. We're doing it to take care of ourselves. We're doing it to stay safe. At some point, that protective or safe behavior can actually be detrimental to us and be maladaptive or not able to change. But anyway, first and foremost, Steve, without reading, because we got a definition. Actually, we have two of them on the screen. Without that, reading that definition, what do you think self-sabotaging behavior is? Like, give me a sum up.
I think self-sabotaging behavior is when you point out everything that we have on the screen that the audience doesn't need to know.
How is that like?
I'm kidding, but I just think it's funny that like you don't need to tell people that we have bullet points up on the screen.
I don't necessarily. I will say this much. I caught this in the last episode you posted. I can see the reflection of the screen in my glasses. Like, I can't read it, but
the
I know
bullet
there's
points
a
are just
screen
there
up
to
there.
remind us what we want to talk about.
I know, but I don't.
It's funny to me that you're like, hey,
I have a hard time. Okay, so here is something about me, everyone. You get to learn a little bit about Nick. I have a hard time not saying things. And you might have noticed if you listen to our episodes often enough, I have a hard time not saying things. So when I'm looking up at the screen and I see a bullet point that we made in preparation for the episode, I end up reading it, or I end up pointing out that it's there, because shit goes in and then it comes out. There's not a lot of filter in between, i.e. I swear a lot too. And it is something that I am working on, is something that Steve wants me to work on. And actually my mother also would like me to work on how much I swear.
Is that
So I am working on
self-sabotaging behavior, Nick?
What, the swearing?
Yeah.
Completely and absolutely.
You just
Absolutely.
make yourself vulgar so people don't want to be around you?
Yes. And I think there's more to it. And actually, let's start there. Okay, cool. I actually don't mind that. My swearing, and I figured this out a bunch of years ago, but it's actually been hard to change that behavior, if you will, to like make that change completely. A lot of my swearing was about keeping people at arm's length. It was about keeping people away from me. It was trying to keep people from knowing who I was, trying to keep people away from knowing how scared I was, how much I felt, keeping people from knowing that I had a lot of emotion, like I've talked about on previous episodes.
I always read it as you using it like a filler word.
Well, that's what it became once I did some work on myself.
It feels like instead of saying but or like or you're like fucking fuck,
Yeah.
fuckity, fuck.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this much though, in my own belief, no word has power unless you, the recipient, gives it power. Okay. So like if a person comes at you and says, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, like that doesn't have to mean anything. That could be them going the at you, right? They're doing it to puff up. So if you don't give it power, then it doesn't have to be anything.
Well, I really don't care most of the time what people say to me. So
yeah, I don't really react much when people call me names or they try to get
I've heard
uppity and
people
shit.
say the craziest shit, not just about me or at me or towards me, but even just when they're talking about someone else or talking about other people. I've heard people say the most insane things, wild, crazy statements, all kinds of isms and ists and dumb things that people say. And I'm just okay.
Right. There's also a level
you have
of
to choose when to engage and when not to engage, because you can only invest so much emotional emotions into you know.
I also got a lot of reaction out of people. Some positive, some negative, but I got reaction out of people, and it allowed me to be seen. Yes, seen in a bad way, but it allowed me to be seen and somewhat validated. And unfortunately, that carried over to I swore so much and was so inappropriate in my language that it did carry over into relationships, and I ruined relationships because of it. I ruined friendships. I ruined relationships with partners, because I did get validated and I was seen because I said the things out loud that other people aren't willing to say, because he's so vulgar, because he's so passionate or combative or aggressive or brash. But people would say it on one hand as a compliment, and on the other hand, because critique.
It can get tiring for people to deal with that.
Well, yes, I know.
It gets overwhelming, or people get sick. At some point, like being edgy becomes cringe.
Right.
It goes from being, oh, okay, that's interesting, or it's funny, or wow, you said that, shocking. And then at some point crosses over to, all right, let's like cut it out. Or, hey, it's not funny anymore.
Right.
Becomes cringe, becomes whatever.
Yeah. But instead of doing something about it, I did what most humans have tendency of doing. I put all the blame on those people who didn't like it and thought it was cringe. And I just found other people who found it more accepting.
Yeah. I find a lot of edgy humor nowadays, I don't find it as funny as I used to.
Neither do I.
A lot of it is more cringy to me.
Sure.
And
Not a word I would use, but yeah.
It's cringe. It's cringe in the actual definition of cringe. To me, like it actually makes me physically cringe. I'm like,
I agree with you. I just don't use the word.
When somebody makes a crude joke, or it's kind of like when we had the episode when we talked about people making inappropriate comments about women's bodies or things like that. If you see a post or video and it's a young, attractive woman and she's doing whatever and people are making comments about her body, it's cringy. It's like, all right, dude, really? Like,
yeah. Like, it's not about that. Move on.
Yeah, it's cringe, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I feel when people make edgy jokes.
Right.
It depends. Sometimes edgy jokes can still make me laugh or be clever, but the problem is a lot of times it's not clever.
Right.
And it's like just an easy way to say something shocking.
Low-hanging fruit most of the time.
And the low-hanging fruit to me, it's like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Especially since we do comedy. To me,
there's some context for us.
It's low effort, low-hanging fruit. It's like, all right,
because when
you're funny.
When we get new people to join us every now and again, or like somebody from the audience comes up into a game and they immediately do a sex joke.
Yeah.
Like there's no real thought into it. They just immediately say something sexual.
Dildo. It's funny. Get it?
Like,
it's a toy that people put in their bodies. Get it?
Exactly. So like when
it's a piece of silicone. It looks like a penis.
Well,
Get it?
If you think about it, the people who automatically associate swearing with lower intelligence.
Yeah.
Right. Or you're only saying it to get a shock value out of it. Or maybe I'm just super passionate and, I can't think of any other word because I'm highly emotional. Right. But I always find it interesting that people associate that with lower intelligence, even though I guess over the last year, there's been a research paper or two that said like people who swear more actually have higher intelligence or some bullshit. I read something about that, but like, I don't know. I don't know either way if it's true or not. I don't think the two have anything to do with one another.
I would think that the reason why people would think that to be true or why it may be true.
The lower intelligence one?
Yeah. Is, well, I wouldn't say lower intelligence. I would say less educated. But I think people who have more of an education.
Those are the same shit.
The reason I would say if you're like a professor, you're probably not swearing as often because of your reputation. Like people are probably not going to take you as seriously if your professor is just dropping F-bombs all the time. Also, let's say you're a lawyer, right? Yes. If you're a successful lawyer, people probably aren't going to take you as seriously if you're just swearing all the time because they associate that with professionalism.
Right, they do.
So if you have a higher education,
right,
by the necessity of whatever it is that you're doing professionally, by necessity, you're probably going to be more couth because
potentially.
In order to be successful in your career, if you're a scientist who works at NASA or if you work for the government or people who have a lot of education probably don't swear very much because they can't in the field that they work in. Right. It's not gonna be taken well. They're not going to be taken seriously if they're just swearing up a storm. That
is potentially true. I just very quickly anecdotal story. I had a political science class? I think it was political science class. I don't even remember the name of the class because he was so awesome. I had a professor who would swear all the time. And it was the class was about politics and social issues and stuff. And he would swear all the time. And he said, if you have a problem with that, you should probably leave the class because I ain't going to change what I'm doing. I'm way too far into my career to give a shit. And like a couple of people did actually drop his class. And he was like, I understand. I get you're dropping the class. You want your professor to be all nice and shit, and I won't do it. But then he actually made a point during the class, like with one of the topics he was covering, that the people who tried to separate themselves from the others, from other people in society by saying, this is how we're going to talk, right? And define attributes and characteristics about a person based on the way they talk in such a way, he was saying that that's also a level of classism. And based on his point, I agree with him, except for I'm not 100% sure like the whole concept of classism. I understand certain pieces.
Well, that was the other point I was going to, I was going to make about the education thing is if somebody's less educated, they're probably also from a lower socioeconomic class or a status, right?
Potentially.
And we associate vulgarity with lower class, lower educated people.
You know what's interesting about that? We associate it with, as you just said, lower class, but yet how come we always think lower class means poorer? Why do we always associate the two of those?
Because that's what class means. Class is based on your socioeconomic position.
Wait, but then when we call somebody classy, are we saying they got more money? I thought
That's
that was
where it comes from.
I thought that was
like high class would be like think of like an aristocrat or during the Gilded Age, a rich person.
I always took that to mean like their behavior.
No, it comes from like
well mannered.
It comes from like feudalism, like the peasant class and the noble class.
Well,
and the royal class.
I just learned something. I was only looking at class in the sense of, I mean, if we're talking economics, I understand you mean classes and like how much money a person has. But when somebody says somebody's classy, I think of it as more of like good, well-mannered behavior. Well, which I guess there is something to do with it.
It's gotten more complicated over the years, but it originates from having different social classes. You have the nobles, you have the peasants, you have royalty, right?
Yeah.
Different classes, and depending on where you fall in society,
right?
Like if you're a peasant, you can't move up to this class. You're a lower class, right?
Yeah, like the caste system in India.
Yeah, it's like caste system or feudalism, any of that type of stuff.
All right,
but obviously the term has evolved over time, and it's different now because we have a middle class, right? Which didn't exist in history. You basically had poor people and rich people. You didn't have a middle class.
Right.
Now we have a middle class.
What is it? The bourgeoisie and the
proletariat.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
okay.
like that. Well, I'm just trying to say like those who have and those who have not, right? Yeah, it's that idea.
Right. Marx and Engels over here.
What?
I was calling you Karl Marx.
Yeah. No, I got that part, but who's the other one?
Engels.
Who's that?
The guy who wrote with Marx.
Oh, really? There was another person?
The other communist guy. Yeah. Marx and Engels.
Well, I knew Marx.
Yeah.
Like I knew who he was, but I had no idea who the other guy was. So by the way, if you haven't noticed in this episode or in any episode whatsoever, Steve actually has a wider breadth of knowledge in more topics than I do. I've really only focused most of my life on just learning about behavior and like answering the question for myself, why do humans do what they do? Outside of that, I don't give a shit. And I understand that a lot of these factors, like how much money a person has, their education level, like where they live in the world, I know all of that affects that, but I never gave a shit about like all of the things around that. Would I call that ancillary stuff? But anyway, let's go back to our topic of self-sabotage, which by the way, we've actually been talking about.
Here's another thing, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm gonna call you out.
Yeah, please do.
You don't have to call out your segue. We can just segue back into it without saying, all right, now back to the topic.
Maybe that's just the way I operate, dude. It didn't hurt anything for me to do that. So that's a thing I would like to point out. So like when we're talking about self-sabotaging behavior,
it's just not my style of doing things.
I know. There is a difference. So like when your buddy or somebody critiques something you're doing, always kind of evaluate it in this way. Is it hurting anything? Right. And that was a concept that took me a very long time to understand because I was critical of other people's behavior for whatever reason that may be. And I never took into context or I never took into context or thought about like whether it was hurting somebody or not and whether it was okay to do or not. I just thought, well, I don't do it that way. So why are you doing it that way? But if it ain't hurting nothing, who gives a shit? And it took me a long time to get to that point, by the way. It took a long time to retrain myself. So the segue thing, too, is also a matter for me. It's a recorrection for myself, too. So I can move on topic-wise. It allows me to segregate from the last thing I was talking about. Anyway, so self-sabotage by definition. Self-sabotaging when it creates problems in daily life and interferes with long-standing goals. And that's something I really want to emphasize is when it gets in the way of your goals or what you want to do with your life. Let me read another one here. Self-sabotage undermines your success despite your own wishes, dreams, or values. It often stems from low self-esteem, negative self-talk, and related negative emotions, which are continually reinforced by the resulting failure. That's kind of where I take the standpoint about self-sabotage and why it's so important to work on it and identify what is self-sabotage for you. And even when we go through the different types here in a minute, I want you to understand that like we're defining them as what somebody has identified as being self-sabotaging behavior, but these can be much, much more pervasive and harder to spot in our own behavior because we can sometimes rationalize that it's other people's fucking fault. Other people are to blame. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So Self-sabotage is often a symptom of low self-esteem. It may also be a symptom of traumatic experiences, anxiety disorders, or perhaps another condition. People who self-sabotage may also have poor or underdeveloped coping skills. So the perhaps other conditions, like, autism might be a thing, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, anxiety, traumatic experience, PTSD.
I mean,
all
those
of these
things that the liberal media made up.
Yep, that's it.
Yep.
And okay, so yeah, like all. I'm sorry. So all of those.
Been
things,
listening to NPR again, haven't you?
I have. So I want to point out that those things may be a contributing factor and maybe directly the reason why you're self-sabotaging yourself. And there's something you can do about it. Just because you have a condition, just because you have a neural difference, just because you operate a little differently than other people, you can still do something about it. The main reason why I'm bringing this up is because I actually saw somebody's TikTok this morning, and they were saying that they have PTSD and there's nothing they can do about it. They're just going to be broken the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so sad because there is stuff that you can do about PTSD. And there are a lot of people who have
drugs
got, oh, Jesus.
No,
only if you get the good ones.
No, I was kidding because I know that some people do like the what do you call it? The psychedelics.
Oh yeah. Oh, the psychedelic stuff. Yeah, like DMT and stuff.
They do
and ayahuasca.
They do the psychedelics for PTSD therapy to try to like work through the trauma while they're tripping.
Doing DMT. And there is some evidence to support that stuff. Some people self-medicate with alcohol and
I wasn't talking about that
drugs.
type of drugs.
Yeah, some people do that too.
I meant like the other.
Yeah. Oh, and we are not endorsing nor advocating for any of it. Just pointing it out.
I'm glad you get my
sure.
my sarcasm.
I do,
because I made a sarcastic comment the other day online and it didn't go over well.
I'm not surprised.
I even put there's an online tag
Uh-huh.
which you probably don't know, but I'm going to tell you anyway. It's called, if you put a /s after you write something, that means sarcasm.
Oh, really?
So that's a way to let people know that you're being sarcastic without saying I'm being sarcastic.
Oh shit, I misinterpreted that.
You write a sentence and then period, space, /s, sarcasm, right? So I wrote, somebody posted a picture. There's this picture going on online about the pink dolphin that was spotted. It's like a rare pink dolphin.
Oh, yeah?
Pink dolphins are rare.
Cool.
Somebody took a picture of a pink dolphin in Florida. And I commented and I said, we get it. You're gay. I know it's June, but does every aquatic mammal have to just shove it in our faces? And then I put /s after that to like signify, which even if I didn't put the /s, I thought that was pretty obvious that was a joke. Yeah. But some people took me seriously and I'm like, wait a minute, you thought I was seriously mad that there was a pink dolphin? First of all, it doesn't make sense that I'm assuming the dolphin's gay because it's pink.
Yeah.
Second of all, how is a dolphin like shoving it in our? I'm like, doesn't make any sense. I was
none of it makes sense.
And they were like, well, because you never know nowadays. People get mad at rainbows and stuff. I'm like, it's a fucking dolphin.
Oh my God.
It was a joke.
Oh my God.
Okay.
I almost joined a live just to argue with people because their premise on the screen was
like I'm making fun of those people.
Rainbows are not gay. They're a promise from God. And like, the fuck are you talking about? Who gives a shit that they use a rainbow fucking flag?
Because didn't they used to use rainbows in like in religious iconography?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever.
So what? But there's not like, it was a stupid argument. Anyway, back onto our.
Well, that was.
I'm sorry.
That was my.
So types of self-sabotage better.
Yeah. Well, that was my point when I was making the dolphin comment. Is I was making fun of people who get upset by like gay wedding cakes and rainbows and stuff like that. But I know that our people aren't good at reading sarcasm, but that's why I put the /s. But apparently, some people didn't know what that meant either.
Okay, so somebody did /s at the end of their statement. I thought they were calling me stupid.
No, it means sarcasm.
Because we were arguing back and forth 2 points, and then all of a sudden they were like, "Yeah, sure, bro." /s, and I was like, "You calling me fucking stupid? The fuck is wrong with you?"
No, that means
I was nice to you.
They're being sarcastic. Yeah, sure, bro.
I said some really inappropriate shit back, so I should probably apologize to that person, and I probably will apologize to them. Like I didn't realize that was /sarcasm.
Oh, by the way, the dolphin thing was not on an autistic page. It was just on a random friend's page that I know that person's gay.
Yeah.
And they shared it. And I was kidding, but the person who was attacking me was trying to defend their friend because their friend's gay.
Yeah.
And they thought I was like actually homophobic. But
Oh,
I was like,
really?
it's a fucking comment about a dolphin. Like, how are you taking that seriously? I'm like, okay.
So if anybody didn't know, it is Pride Month. And one of the two of us is part of that community. So I don't know how you're going to accuse me of being fucking against that community. And then the other one is...
Wait. Do you think that you can be a member of a community and not also be against it?
Well, so the reason why I bring that up is because when I pointed out
Couldn't you be a homophobic gay man?
I don't think so. No.
I think you can be.
I don't think you can be scared
Can't be
of
a
yourself.
self-hating gay man?
Okay, I still don't like the fact that
I know.
homophobia is translated to hating somebody now.
That's what the term actually means.
No, it is not. It
You're talking about
fear of homo.
You're talking about the etymological origin.
I'm talking about the actual fucking for phobia.
Right.
Okay?
The etymological origin of phobia
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
is phobos, right? The Greek god
Sure.
of fear. That's
Sure.
where phobia comes from. What
Sure.
do you mean sure?
No, the reason why I'm saying
Phobos
that, yeah, I
means
understand. I understand. What I'm talking about, because most things I put through the psychology world lens, in psychology,
I get that, but that's
phobia
not-
means fear of.
I know that, but that's not how anyone uses the word.
I don't care how
And-
people use that word.
And nobody actually, the word homophobia has never meant I'm afraid of gay people. The word doesn't exist
then it
that way.
shouldn't have been put together that way.
But it doesn't matter. Anyway.
Why don't
people-
you just call it like homo hate or something?
But that's not what you said anyway. You said that
Yeah.
you can't be against the community. I think you can be against gays and be a gay person.
I don't.
You can be a black person who
So let me
is
restate.
antithetical to.
I don't want to believe that there is a gay man who hates gay men.
I've met some.
For that, you'll have to
What
check
the
your
heck?
network settings.
Thanks, Google. That was weird.
Wait, how did Google just go off when you said you do believe?
I have to check my network settings for the LGBTQ community. That's weird.
Okay, so I don't want to believe.
Yeah.
Okay, so take our own community for autism, right? So we can tie this into autism somehow. I don't want to believe that there is an autistic person who hates autistic people.
I'm sure
wanna
there are.
believe-
I don't know anybody than myself, but I'm sure
Right.
they exist.
I don't want to believe that there are autistic people who hate themselves so much that they hate the community at large.
I've met gay people who hate gay people.
Seriously?
Yes.
How?
They use slurs against them and
Oh,
everything.
no. That part I've heard, but that to me, using a slur against somebody doesn't mean you necessarily
Okay,
hate them.
now if you're part of the LGBTQ community,
Uh-huh.
would it help you? Would it make more sense to you if it was like a gay man who hated trans people?
See, that makes more sense to me
Because I've also met
because
those.
I met one of those too.
And I've met. So not everybody who's part of a specific community necessarily likes all members of that community.
Right.
Just like there's obviously people who are black who maybe
Hate black people?
yeah, or don't or do things or have opinions that kind of go against their own best interest
Okay.
as a community.
That I think is like borderline what we're talking about here. So specifically for LGBT community, yes, a lesbian can hate gay men, bi women, trans, in any direction, non-binary. They can fucking hate all those people.
Like TERFs.
I don't think a lesbian, and again, I don't want to believe that there are lesbians who hate lesbians. I want to believe that there are lesbians who dislike what some lesbians say publicly. I want to believe that there are lesbians or gay people who dislike the directionality of the community, but I don't want to believe that there are lesbians who exist who hate other lesbians.
Well, there's
for
men.
being lesbian.
There's men who hate men. There's women who hate women.
Yes.
There's
No, they don't hate women at large. They hate types of women. They hate subsets.
What
of
I
the
mean,
overall
what I
group.
mean, hate. I mean, like they're sexist. I mean, like there's women who are sexist
see, I
against
don't-
women.
I also don't think sexist is hateful per se, because there's that lady, I wish I knew her name, white lady, young white lady. I forget what color hair she has, but anyway, she says some shit that's super sexist against women. But you could also frame it as she's using very traditional values because she thinks women need to get in the fucking kitchen, even though she's got a successful podcast and shit. And she says shit like that, right? She says very like pro-man, anti-woman statements.
Right.
I don't think she hates
Well, you don't
women.
have to go on about this for 20 minutes. All I was pointing out
No,
is
no.
you said that, well, I can't be against the LGBT community because I'm a member of it. And I was saying, well, I think that you
Okay,
can be.
Well, that's why I
Yeah.
reframed it
Yeah.
to I don't want to believe that there's somebody who is a member of the LGBT
Right.
community who also hates the
Right.
LGBT
That's all.
community.
That's all my point was. Is that there are plenty of people who are
No. You're helping me
hateful or
articulate my
against
point.
their own.
Yeah. You're helping me articulate my point
Their
better,
own
and I
group.
appreciate
And
that.
I'm sure there are autistic people who hate other autistic people
No,
or who
They hate points that the autistic person is making. They hate what the autistic person is
Right.
doing, but they don't hate them for being autistic.
Well, I'm just speaking in
or
generality
maybe.
here.
I just don't want to believe that exists.
Well, if you don't hate autistic people, just spend a few hours on a Reddit, and then you probably will.
Yeah,
So,
that's actually true. Or work at a group home. That's a joke. That is just sarcasm.
no,
Okay,
it's not
so
a
anyway,
joke. He means it.
one day I'll get out of human services. All right, so let's talk about types of self-sabotaging behavior. Steve pointed out one of mine, so in turn, I'm going to point out one of his. And I can only imagine the rationalization I'm going to get, but a desire of control. That's the way it's called, but control freak, right?
Really? That's
Being
the one you're
overly
picking?
Controlling.
I thought there'd be better ones you could pick from that.
Well, there is, but
Procrastination.
what fascination?
Procrastination.
Oh, no, I don't want to.
I'm a procrastinator.
Yeah, I don't want to pick at that wall, dude. But it's the control freak one because
I don't think I'm really that much as much of a control freak as I used to be. So I feel like that's a bad one to pick.
Hold on, but that's just it though. I didn't specify how much or how little, but you just pointed out that you still are. You said you're not as much as you were
because
you still are.
Because I'm aware of it and I tried to not do it.
Right, because you identified the thing that was sabotaging you in some way. And then you started to work on it. Just like I pointed out the swearing thing. I used to use it for a specific purpose, a protective, kind of thing, but it wasn't working for me anymore. And so I've been working on it for a bunch of years now.
A lot of the controlling stuff
getting headway.
Also has to do with, I don't want to call it trauma necessarily, but past experiences, negative past experiences. I wouldn't call it trauma necessarily, but
me and you got to start getting comfortable with that, man.
Well, because I don't think that these particular things qualify as trauma necessarily. Because trauma to me sounds very serious, but I just mean like negative experiences, like things not really going the way I would like them to, or not being able to accomplish goals in the past. So it's like I've tried to do things in the past, and when I did things other people's way, either nothing got done or things didn't go where I wanted them to, and so I became more of a control freak because when I was in control of more things, I was able to accomplish things.
But I want to point this out because that's completely makes sense why you would do that, right?
Yeah.
Because people weren't getting shit done. So you felt like to get it done, you had to take more control over it, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I think most people can agree to that. The reason why I'm calling out the control freak thing, and I'm going to stop saying freak because it is derogatory and I don't mean it to, because some of your controlling behavior is actually a good thing as well, because you're working against some of my self-sabotaging behaviors and we're actually getting shit done because of it. And this is a minor example. You don't need to defend it. I understand why, right? Because there's a good reason why, but it still kind of leads to control thing. Making sure that all materials for the things we post, you have access to. The reason why I'm bringing that up is because, like, even when I would ask you if I could have, an episode to be able to clip out stuff and whatnot, you also expressed to me during one of our conversations that one of the reasons why you've been reticent, same idea, right? Yeah. Okay, great. One of the reasons why you're a little slow to give me access to some of that stuff is because, in your opinion, you want to do it a certain way, make it look a certain way, be very particular about it. And like when it comes to the audio quality and the visual quality of the podcast, right? You're very precise about it. Like, very much so. But I'm saying it very much so compared to my standard. You have a much higher standard for it, right? And there's nothing wrong with having standards, but sometimes our standards can also get in the way of getting done with things.
It can. But
example,
is it self-sabotage?
Well, that's why it can be.
Is it self-sabotage if I am taking control of certain things in my environment, and other people might see it as me being too controlling, but I'm actually accomplishing goals that I have. And so
yes,
at that point, it's not really self-sabotage if I'm getting things done that I want to get done.
Well, So again, it can be self-sabotaging if while accomplishing those goals, you're also inhibiting other aspects of your life.
The only thing I could see
and I'm
inhibiting,
not saying you are, I'm just using this as an example.
the only thing I could see is maybe in relationships with other people, but like if I'm too controlling, am I hurting my relationships?
Right.
But that would depend on what's my goal with those people. Do I want to have a relationship with those people? Because according to the definitions of self-sabotaging, it would only be self-sabotaging if I care about the relationships with those people.
Right. And
so like if you're running a business and my employees are getting upset because I'm too controlling, but I don't have enough level of trust with them, or they're not at a point where they can take over a particular project.
I would say right there is not necessarily, but at least leaning towards a rationalization of why you have to maintain control. Well, my employees haven't provided me with enough evidence to support that I can trust them or that they're competent enough. Well, sometimes you got to let people fail. You got to let people make mistakes. Sometimes you got to relinquish a little bit of control and know it's not going to be up to how good you would do it, or necessarily like they're not necessarily.
Right, but you don't. If you're doing that, you don't give somebody a big project to start with. You give them smaller projects.
Yeah.
Because you don't want them to fail on something that's going to tank your business.
But that's the other thing too. Is like, yes, we're talking about self-sabotaging behavior and we're putting it in the guise of business, but yes, you have to worry about that bottom line.
I just use business because at that point you might not care as much about the relationships with those people as you would for like your family or your friends. Right. Is what I mean.
So I think in that regard though, like it's either you work 100 hours a week or you risk somebody.
It doesn't even have to be a boss. I just meant professional relationships in general.
Oh.
Like if you're working on a project and you're trying to do things your way, because it doesn't have to be a boss. It could just be like, I'm working a project. My coworkers, do I care what my coworkers think about me enough? Then I'm sabotaging those relationships. But if I don't care about those relationships with those people, then it's not really self-sabotage necessarily. So
here's something I'll point out, because I did a project in an engineering class in college, and it was me and 4 other people. And we all started contributing ideas, whatnot. And this one dude decided in 2 days to write up the entire report and do out all the math for the entire project, and decided to try to present it to the professor and say that we didn't do anything. Right. And when the professor called him out in front of the entire class, the very next class, and said, well, why did you go ahead and do it all yourself? And he said, because I knew I could do the math on my own. And he goes, but I didn't ask you to do that. I asked you to work as a team. And he said, well, they all came up with ideas, but I knew how to do what you wanted me to do. And so I took their ideas into consideration and I put this all together. And he goes, yeah, but I didn't ask you to do that. So that was him, that one dude, trying to take control and to make sure he got a good grade, because he was not willing to trust the other members of the group to try to get a good grade on the project.
Yeah. I mean, I see that as being somewhat rational. It's maybe not the best decision, but it makes sense. It's rational to do that. Like, it can be scary, right? That if I'm asked to work in a group project with people that I don't know very well, I don't have any trust for you because I don't know you. Right. And my grade is going to be dependent upon these other people that I don't necessarily have a relationship with. And I don't know like why. Because that sucks. It kind of sucks. It's like my grade is going to be partially dependent on these other 3 idiots. So I don't know. Like,
well, by the way, you just identified them as idiots before you even know them.
Because if you don't know the person, you could assume, right? That they might not be willing to contribute, or they might not know much. It doesn't mean that they do, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know these people from a hole in the wall.
Right. But you also did not give the opportunity to get to know them before you called them idiots.
Yeah. I'm just saying.
You just automatically assumed that they weren't going to be able to do shit.
Then prove to me you're not an idiot.
Why should anybody have to prove themselves to you?
Because I was forced to work in a group with you against my will.
But that's not their fault. They should not have to prove themselves to you, just like you don't have to prove yourself to them. Y'all just have to come together and contribute with each other.
Right, but what if the group doesn't work well together, or if you aren't contributing anything, which that happens too. You work in a group with like 3 or 4 people, and like one person decides they just don't want to do shit.
You're right.
And they ride the coattails of the other 3 people.
Great.
That's not really fair either.
Who the fuck said life was fair?
What's not fair, which is why you shouldn't be assigned
It's
group
called
projects with random people.
No, bullshit. It's called cognitive distortion, fallacy of fairness.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that life is fair or should be fair.
I don't think it should be either.
I'm just saying that that's something we have control over, though. Like your professor is purposely choosing to shove you with other people.
Right.
And I don't want to be responsible for their grade, and they shouldn't be responsible for my grade.
Because apparently in the field of engineering, which he had worked in for a bunch of years, team projects was a thing.
Now,
and you have to know how to work on a team correctly.
Well, context would make more sense if you're going into STEM field, right?
Yeah,
and let's say you're going into engineering and you work for big companies, and these big companies force you to work on projects with random people all the time. Right. In that context, it makes a little more sense because it's actually preparing you for the workforce.
But that's why a lot of different classes in college force you to do team projects or like you and one other person.
But it still makes sense that you would be. There's also a difference to me, like being in school versus working for a company.
There's a big difference, actually.
I would.
I mean, the same behaviors happen, though.
I would assume, like, yes, you're going to get stuck with shitty coworkers as well. Yeah. But at some point, the shitty coworker gets fired if they're shitty all the time.
Potentially.
Or depending on, maybe they're a Nepo baby and they're just, there because their daddy works at the company or something. But either way, you're probably more likely to have somewhat competent coworkers versus like the people you're with in college. It could just be some dumb kid who doesn't want to be there.
So I'd like to point out that a lot of by the way, I don't disagree with anything you've been saying. I agree completely as well, because I got a little bit of control problem too. I'd just like to point out that a lot of your rationalization that you're giving right now, not 100% is, but at least provides example for control. And it can be self-sabotage.
I don't like
because
I don't like being responsible for things that are out of my control.
I understand that, but you also assert control over things, maybe so much so that you burn yourself out, take on too much responsibility, and you yourself end up not following through on some things because you've asserted control so much so that it then becomes a problem.
Potentially.
I'm saying potentially. I can name off some times, but I ain't doing that this time around. I'm just saying both of us have had problems with control. Me and you at times have been at odds with each other in conversations, in decision-making for certain things, because both of us were trying to assert control because we thought we knew best without hearing each other out completely. There has been those times. And both of us should have taken a breath and tried to listen to the other person, and we could have maybe made a better decision together. That's what I think desire of control, self-sabotaging can look like.
Sometimes
you become so on everything around you that everybody thinks that you're just being a dick and you just want control or whatever.
Well, sometimes we argue with each other even though we're both on the same page or we both agree. But we're talking around each other.
Oh, yeah. We've definitely done that a bunch of times.
Your thought process and the way that you come to conclusions about things is a little bit different than the way I think about things. Oh, yeah. So sometimes your rationale, I'm like, what the fuck? You say something, I'm like, how the fuck do you rationalize that? And you have your own way of getting there. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me because I don't think that way.
Oh, yeah. And then even though we're agreeing with each other on the end conclusion, we still end up arguing with each other about how we got there. And then we're both like, walk me through how you got there. Right. And so we end up talking more about how we got there more so than the actual conclusion. So anyway, types of self-sabotaging behavior. I want to jump to another one because this is a really controlling behavior is a really, really big deal because it can actually lead to the point of like being abusive in a relationship and like emotionally and psychologically abusive to a partner and or a friend. So it can be really bad for a lot of those reasons, but it can also be bad because
I think the stereotypical example is like the romantic comedy example where, the person's had a bunch of horrible relationships in the past. So they start purposely pushing the person away.
Yeah. Taking your baggage out on somebody else.
It's like, the pretty girl who's had guys who treated him bad. And this funny, quirky guy comes along and he's trying to get to know her and she keeps shutting him down. Not because she doesn't like him, but because she's afraid to get hurt.
Right. And they have that big speech towards the end.
That's a classic example.
Those are some of my favorite movies. I'm a huge fan of romantic comedies. Although I'm not a very romantic person, but I still love the movies. Anyway, exactly. And that kind of controlling behavior can also cause people to be isolationist because they're trying to control their environment so much. I'm looking at you, autistic people who live in their parents' basement sometimes. They close themselves off to the possibility of making connection with other people because they're trying to control their environment so much. And I know some people are probably hearing me talk about some of this stuff and going, yeah, but I got sensory issues. I got, emotional regulation issues to deal with. I got a nervous system thing going on. I got this issue. I got that issue. And I hear you on all of it. And I'm not saying it's easy to make friends. I'm just saying that sometimes we rationalize decisions that are self-sabotaging to us, and we justify them by saying, well, nobody liked me in the past, so nobody will like me in the future.
I can give you an example.
Fortune-telling kind of idea that's self-sabotaging.
That I've done myself, and I've seen other people do.
Okay.
It's really another relationship one, but it's going after people that are unobtainable. So, for instance, trying to start a long-distance relationship that is not going to work out because there's no risk.
Right.
So if I start talking to, I haven't done this, but I'm just making an example here. Let's say I start talking to a girl in India, right? The chances of us meeting up or me going to India and meeting with her are probably pretty slim.
Or even having a successful long-term relationship.
So I can just, we can chat online and have fun and talk to each other, but I don't have to worry about having an actual commitment.
Right.
So I've done stuff like that in the past. I've met people online and had like fake online relationships with them. Because there was no threat of me getting actually hurt.
Right. I will say that avoiding risk is a predominant theme for most self-sabotaging behavior. I will say I actually did the opposite of what you're talking about. You're talking about you would pursue people that you did not have a chance with.
Yeah, because then I had every excuse. I'm like, well, it's, they're far away. I had all these excuses as to why.
They're out of my league. They're smarter than me. I don't know.
No, but these were some of the.
I'm just throwing out all the potential.
Some of these girls were people that I actually had like an online relationship with, but it was easy to have an online relationship because it didn't. Yeah, there was no pressure for it to go anywhere.
Yeah, I'm going to give a real honest opinion about that, and I know a bunch of you online people are going to argue the shit out of me, and please try to argue with me about this. I'd really love to actually hear somebody else's point of view. Not a single online relationship is a real relationship, and none of them fucking work. I'm making that as a blanket statement. No, I don't have much of anything to back that up with, except for anecdotal stories of I've never seen it work. It depends on
what you mean by relationship.
I'm talking about like people saying their boyfriend, girlfriend,
you mean like
married.
A romantic relationship?
Intimate relationship.
I've had a long-term pen pal for not anymore, but I used to. For years, I had a long-distance pen pal.
And that's cool.
Write emails back and forth back in the day when people still wrote emails.
You are correct. I misspoke. I'm talking about intimate relationships like marriages, boyfriend, girlfriend, that kind of jazz. Not friendships. Friendships can work long term because there's actually less emotional risk in a friendship than a intimate partner. I honestly believe, and I'm going to say this as my belief, my opinion is that online intimate partner relationships cannot be successful and are not real relationships. There is. I do not believe you can acquire.
I'm going to post this clip on Reddit so you get
please
attacked.
do. No, absolutely, absolutely. This should be something you put up and you go, is Nick wrong? Right? I do not believe it can exist. I don't believe anybody's ever successfully made
I'm going to post it on
work.
RussianDating.com or whatever.
Perfect. I don't believe anybody's ever successfully pulled it off.
I don't know if that's a real website.
And yes, does that limit my possibility of meeting, an intimate partner and making that work? Yes, it's limiting, but there's a lot of things we do that are limiting in that regard. But also, I'm with somebody who I've been with for a long time, and me and her have made life work.
It's like the joke. I don't remember the comedian. There was a comedian to me that used to make the joke about a soulmate.
Yeah,
it's like, because you're only talking to people who maybe live in your general area or in your country.
Yeah.
But no, I happen to find my soulmate out of the 8 billion people in the world. Maybe your soulmate's some random person in China, but you've never met. But no, your soulmate just happens to be right here in Massachusetts.
Right.
What are the odds?
I love how funny that is. All right.
I don't remember whose bit that was, but
I just don't believe that they can possibly work for an assortment of reasons. And when I say intimate, by the way, I do not mean physical. Intimacy and physicality are two different things. I don't believe people need to be.
Do I need to play Careless Whisper?
Getting it on? Yes, you do.
Anytime I hear Intimacy, I just think of that song.
Really?
Yeah,
Like you immediately go Careless Whisper?
I don't. That
Alright.
song is so great for like accentuating anything or for memes, and it's just.
So what does it say about me when I hear the word intimacy? I immediately think of Marvin Gaye. Let's get it on.
It means you're old.
What?
It means you're old.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
I think of Barry White
granted-
too, don't you?
Yeah, actually. Yeah.
My
I love you,
darling,
Yeah, exactly.
can't get enough of your love, baby. Yeah, I don't know how, don't
All right.
know why.
So I want to jump to people pleasing because it's one of the most predominant. I think it's one of the most predominant self-sabotaging behaviors there is. Okay, mind reading is another one, and I do want to touch that before we move on. But people pleasing is a big one, and I know you're one of those peeps that does the people pleasing kind of thing. Here's what I want to start with.
I've never
when
looked
comes
at
to
it
this.
as
I know you've never
a
looked at it.
self-sabotaging thing for me anyway.
I know, but it can be. I'm saying can be. By the way,
yeah.
all of these are things that are not bad in moderation, but can be a problem.
It used to be a lot more for me, especially, but that was when we talked about in the most recent episode that I posted about naivety and
Yeah.
For me, it felt more like that, like I was letting myself be taken advantage of. So it's people pleasing, but I wasn't always aware that I was doing it. And
Right.
yeah, I guess it's self-sabotaging in a way, but I chalk a lot of that up to also me being naive and
Well, but I mean, but
too
that's
trusting.
That's the rationalization, though, right? Is too trusting, but you knew full well that there was a possibility it could go wrong, but you chose to ignore that and you decided to trust the person anyway.
At
But
some
in the
point, I did.
process, it became harmful to you because people kept fucking you over.
In the beginning, I really did just believe everything people said.
Yeah, so did I when I was younger too. We had to learn through trauma, apparently. By the way, I wanted to say this before, and I do want to say this again. Me and you need to start getting used to, and I'm saying this mostly for myself, but I'm including you too because we are as close as we are. Me and you need to start getting used to saying the word trauma because we both have it, and we both have a lot of it.
Can we get used to trauma?
Yes,
Like watching
trauma.
Tromeo and Juliet? And
Dude, I
some
used to
Toxic
love,
Avenger?
Yeah, that was my favorite one of them, man. I used to love the trauma films. Anyway, that was
Nick and
my
I both have
favorite.
a lot of trauma.
Yeah, we got a lot of trauma. Oh, I used to own at least most of the videos.
What's some other trauma films? I don't know. There's Toxic Avenger. I remember Tromeo and Juliet. With
Nuke 'Em
the
High?
talking penis.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, there's Nuke 'Em High,
Yeah.
which I was a big fan of Nuke 'Em High.
The really bad movies.
Was Hell Comes to Frogtown, was that a trauma film?
I don't know.
Oh, that
There's
would've been
really
great.
weird indie
Okay.
movies.
Yeah, okay. They're all like B horror movies or like, I don't know, fucking creature features or some shit. Anyway, I don't know what they're classified as. Anyway, people pleasing. So here's the thing. Between men and women are actually more likely to be people pleasers than men. Okay. Especially outwardly, it's more observable in female behavior to be people pleasing than for men. Men are also people pleasers as well, but like to bring this to a more general human aspect, we all want to feel seen and validated. I brought that up before for my
Are
behavior.
you saying I'm a woman?
No, I was just pointing out that it's more likely
I
to be
fit
seen in one than the other, but you know, there's
on my
differences.
Autism masking profile, I fit a female profile.
Yeah,
more.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of that genderized shit is bullshit.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it is. I just think it is.
No,
Because I
well-
really want to believe human are human.
It's just based on the way I scored more like most autistic women score.
Yeah, okay.
That's all.
All right. Well, maybe you're more effeminate than you thought you were. I don't fucking know.
It has to do with the way I mask.
Yeah, could be. I've never taken it, so I don't fucking know. Well, I think I did take it actually. But anyway, people pleasing. So depending also on your personality type, depending on whether you're an extrovert and introvert, a lot of those factors actually tie into people pleasing. And it's not a bad thing to want people to be happy about you being around or to like you. There's nothing actually wrong with that. But people pleasing in this regard, what we're talking about, goes to an extreme to the point where you're putting yourself not second to everybody else, but like 8th, 9th, 10th compared to other people. And that's when it becomes a problem, when you put so many other things ahead of yourself that you're actually shitting on yourself in the process, or you're doing so much for everybody else and you're doing so little for yourself that your shit ain't getting
Like,
done.
sometimes people
That's
feel guilty.
self-sabotaging.
Putting themselves first.
How about just tied for first?
Even still,
I know
people
some
might
people
feel guilty about that too,
because they're afraid of being seen as being selfish.
especially if you have a partner or kids or anybody else in your life. It's like
I know.
you feel this obligation
Yeah.
to make sure they're taken care of.
I've always lived by, and this is actually after I had my psychological break with
Mama
bipolar,
bear
by the way.
syndrome. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. When I had my psychological break in 2010, 2011, after that point is when I started to identify some of this stuff, and I started to learn a bunch of the psych stuff. I would have always agreed with you prior to that moment that you can't put yourself first. You always have to put other people first because, that's the right way to do things, whatnot. It's selfish to do it otherwise. But then I learned something really, really important, which is, and a lot of people already know this statement, but I take it to fucking heart. You cannot help somebody else until you help yourself. Okay? It's the whole idea of putting the mask on yourself on an airplane when it's going down first. Okay? Because if you're hurt in the process of helping somebody else, you're not really helping them at all. And if you're too fucked up, and I'm going to say this psychologically, if you're too fucked up, you cannot be helping somebody else overcome their fucked upness. Okay? You cannot help other people before you help yourself because of that. You have to help you first. You have to be in a good place to be able to help somebody else. Otherwise, you're jeopardizing yourself in the process.
Me first in the Gimme Gimmes.
In the what?
It was a punk band.
Oh, all right. And I know that might sound self-centered or selfish or whatnot. I call it self-focused because you got to be able to take care of you. But if you're people-pleasing all the time, you're giving, and you got nothing left for you, and then you end up burning out.
Sometimes you just got to bend over and take it.
I would not agree with that either.
Just giving,
Wow. It took me a second to realize what you were saying.
You're just saying giving.
Yeah.
Never mind.
No. It took me a second to get it.
Sometimes you just got to take it. Just lay down and take it.
Wow. Said a white man on a podcast. I'm thinking about all the implications of that statement. Anyway, so that's important to kind of pay attention to. And I will say that quite a lot of people who are listening to us right now.
Sorry, I was about to make a horrible joke.
Yeah, you were. And quite a lot of people
one that I
who
won't even say on air. I'll say later.
Well, quite a lot of people who are autistic and ADHD, and there's probably other as well, but those two groups are very predominant. Are very predominant to people please. Okay? Very predominant to people please. And please look into it for yourself. Okay? It is a very harmful thing to do, and it doesn't seem like it's harmful. Kind of like the next one, mind reading. And this is the last one I'm going to talk about before we talk about like what to do about it and whatnot, because we've been talking about why is it harmful. But mind reading. Okay. What would be the harm in mind reading? Or what would that concept be?
You could be, it's prejudice, really, is what it is.
In what way?
Because you're prejudging somebody.
The mind reading?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're prejudging somebody. It's based on whatever.
You're thinking for other people.
Yeah.
That's what mind reading
Well,
is.
you said what could be one of the things could be prejudice.
And it's very harmful. And you're right. That's part of it. Creates biases and prejudice, and a lot of them are against you. Mind reading in this regard of self-sabotaging behavior is when you do a whole lot of thinking for other people. Well, she's not going to like me. They're not going to like me. They think I'm stupid. Well, did they tell you you're stupid? No. But look, the look on their face told me. No, it didn't. You assumed that what their face said was that you're stupid, but you don't have any idea what they're actually thinking.
I assumed that my poo-poo time was going to be a pee-pee time.
Yes, and it wasn't.
And
it's not always. Also, and I'm going to point this out because there are times where both of us are guilty of mind reading. And I try to call people out quite a lot about this too. And yes, we will have this. We're going to try to make this sticker available for people. It is the pee-pee poo-poo sticker.
2024 pee-pee poo-poo.
2024 pee-pee poo-poo. Actually, I'm going to go against my wife's wishes, and I'm actually going to fucking vote for Hal Jordan this upcoming election. And if you don't know who Hal Jordan is, Green Lantern #1, baby. Green Lantern. I'm going to vote for him this year because I don't like any of it for an assortment of reasons. But back to what I was mind reading. When people assume, okay, if you look at somebody and they're wearing overalls, they're wearing a plaid shirt, and they got a baseball cap on that says, I dig fishing. But you automatically assume their points of view of different things. Okay. That's mind reading. And that can be a problem because you're avoiding talking to that person because you're assuming what they think of you, as well as you're assuming what they think about the world around you. And you're like, I don't want to talk to them. They probably blah, blah, blah.
Here's one for you. It's going to blow your mind.
Oh, please do.
That I probably would also do.
Yeah. Okay.
You see a guy wearing an FJB hat.
Okay.
Or Let's Go Brandon hat.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's basically the same thing, by the way. Okay.
Yeah. Now I understood it.
Okay. Would you talk to them?
Would I?
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I would.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So you want to talk to the F. Joe Biden guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know why?
But I'm saying that a lot of people would make a bunch of assumptions
They would.
about who that person is. And
They would. And they
some
would
of those
avoid them
assumptions
altogether.
are probably right, but it's okay.
I mean, yeah, quite a lot of. I mean, they're literally telling you who the fuck they are with that hat.
'Cause, yeah, the type of people who would wear that hat is a very particular type of person.
Very particular. Well,
They're either looking for attention,
Yeah.
or they're probably batshit crazy.
Probably. So I will point out that somebody once said to me, if somebody's wearing a MAGA hat,
Yeah.
okay, you just shouldn't talk to them because X, Y, Z, and they listed off a couple of criteria things, right? But I've actually met people who were wearing shirts and hats that said MAGA, that they were not as batshit crazy as the Let's Go Brandon people. Okay. That's a whole nother level of crazy. Right now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people who are MAGA supporters, who are the MAGA folk, who are batshit fucking crazy. But they were crazy long before President Trump ever was in office. They were crazy long before that. They just now have something to.
We
spout
touched
off
on this,
as
I think, in the last episode, which is a lot of times people go along with things or they talk about things, but it's surface level. So maybe they're MAGA, but they really don't even know anything about politics at all.
Yeah, they're just spouting shit off. I mean, It's
like when we talked about the Israel-Hamas thing, and you said you don't really know much about,
which I still don't.
And I'm like, so yeah, like anything you say, I'm going to take worth a grain of salt because you really don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
It's the same thing. What if somebody is wearing a MAGA hat and they're like a Trump person, but they really don't know anything about Trump. They don't know much about Biden. They don't know much about politics in general. They're just like, yeah, I like Trump.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or what about they just like the idea of making America great?
Yeah. But
I get it. Again, is on the end of that. But
I would say, well, you should probably think a little bit more about your positions before you advertise it.
Absolutely.
But you can't make assumptions about like who that person is necessarily because they might not ascribe to all the beliefs you think they do just because they're ignorant.
Because it's the nuances in their interpretation of these points that I think is important to identify them as the human being that they are.
We find out a lot of people are just ignorant.
Yeah.
They don't actually know much about what they're talking about.
Most of us are.
And most people are. But the thing is, like, I try to, personally, I try to recognize if it's something that I am ignorant about. I try to let people know, hey, I'm ignorant about this. Or if I recognize my own ignorance, I try to learn more about it because I don't like just saying shit and then like realizing, well, is that really true? Or am I just making shit up? Or am I talking out of my ass? Because I don't know. Like you end up spreading misinformation, and that's how misinformation and lies get perpetuated is people say shit that's not true. And then other people repeat the shit that's not true.
I'd like to point out that sometimes you can spread misinformation without realizing it was misinformation. Because when you learned it, it wasn't misinformation, but it then became misinformation because people did some research that you didn't know about along the way.
Yeah, well,
I just want to point that out because, like, I was having a conversation with an older gentleman not too long ago, and somebody overheard us talking and said, "Well, that's not true anymore." And he goes, "Okay, it was when I learned it." And the person said, "Well, you're just spreading more misinformation." And he goes, okay, when did that change? Help me understand that. And they were like, well, you just need to look it up to keep yourself updated.
Well, it's also part of the problem with the 24-hour news cycle,
and I was
where
like,
news is always news exists in a 24-hour cycle now, where news is constantly coming out all the time, 24 hours a day.
70s. Yeah.
And so stuff gets people publish stuff all the time, and that we find out is not true, or they have to amend it.
Right.
But the damage is already done because people, once they see the first headline, they don't look beyond that.
But even in this, me and him were actually talking about in the 90s and the prevailing, thought about mental health and group homes in the 90s. We were actually talking about that, but she missed the context to that. She only heard him talking about the perspective at that point, not that's what we were talking about was in the 90s that. And then she started pointing out, no, we believe blah, blah, blah. I actually think she was wrong in that because she only heard him say one line and then immediately tried to interject. And two, I think she was wrong because she said outright to begin with, oh my God, you're wrong. You need to educate yourself. Why didn't you step into it, find out what we were talking about, and then decide whether you should just outright go, you're wrong, no.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like we were talking about the idea of how they treated people in the 90s. She didn't hear that part of it. She only heard what he said. Anyway, so I do want to read
So if I sat there and I was talking about how autistic people were treated in like the 50s,
yeah,
then she would assume that that's
talking
what I
about
believe.
now.
Like,
Yeah.
we should just put them on drugs and throw them in a basement,
right?
Like that.
Like she actually thought that he believed that autism needed to be cured and that autistic people need to be not even seen in community. Because there was. So
it's kind of like when I made a video about Hans Asperger, and then some people thought that I was supporting Hans Asperger because I just did a historical video about the person.
Right.
Okay.
Because people want to see what they want to see and want to hear what they want to hear and then react accordingly. Because for some,
I did a video series about the history of autism.
Yes.
And I mentioned a person in the history of autism.
Significant in the history. Yeah.
But that means that I support the guy or that we shouldn't talk about Nazis.
Yeah.
But,
somehow we're contributing or supporting Nazis just because we bring up a dude who. And yes, he was a horrible human being and blah, 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 blah. I get all of that, but he is significant in the history of autism. That's the point.
There's lots of historical figures who are, because human beings are complicated. We're not black and white. We're not all or nothing. Right?
Yeah, we're not simple.
There's a lot of historical figures who have checkered past.
Yeah. And by checkered past, we mean they're horrible, horrible, horrible human beings, but that doesn't mean they didn't contribute to the moving forward or progress of human
Didn't Gandhi
existence.
do some messed up stuff?
I thought he was like a woman.
He was like
abuser.
racist or something.
Yeah, I thought he was like a woman abuser and racist and a sexist. Or
didn't Martin Luther King cheat on his wife? And
I thought
stuff
so.
Like that? No, like people.
But that doesn't diminish what they contributed to the world.
People can do bad things and good things.
Yes, they can be shitty people.
Not that I'm saying Hans Asperger did good things. I'm just saying that he made contributions to our understanding of autism. Right. Even though he stole some of his work.
Great. And we did a video on the woman he supposedly stole some of his work from.
But that was the point, is it was the history of it.
Right.
Yeah. So like we talk about the history of the conquistadors. That doesn't mean that you are condoning what the conquistadors did.
Right. We don't condone the fact that they wiped out an entire civilization.
Most of it was unintentional.
Yeah.
Through
some of it.
giving them diseases.
Yeah.
But
so
not that they didn't kill a bunch of them themselves too.
Yeah, which they did. I do want to point out some other types of self-sabotaging behavior. I'm not going to go into them in detail. Please go look these things up because I know all of us, especially as autists, we do this shit on a regular basis. So, types of self-sabotaging behaviors. Procrastination. Okay. And I know there's some folks in our community that's like, procrastination's not real. Yes, it is. I'm not saying all autistic people do it, and I'm not saying we do it all the time. I'm saying human beings in general have tendency to procrastinate some shit for a lot of reasons. Perfectionism.
You're wrong.
Thank you.
I'll tell you later on.
Yeah, please. Perfectionism is another one. I know. I heard the sarcasm in that for fucking once. Anyway, perfectionism is one of them. Fear of success, which is something I grip with on a regular basis. I have a fear of success.
I don't think that's something you need to worry about.
That's part of the reason why I got a fear of success.
I'm kidding.
Well, no, I mean, but I say that to myself on a regular basis is like,
I'm just
I don't have to worry about succeeding because I'm never going to succeed, which is the exact opposite, almost a fear of failure. So I got both of them kicking on me at the same time, which is weird. But anyway, fear of success, negative self-talk, which is something all human beings grip with on a regular basis. We all have that voice in our head that doubts us, shits on us, tells us we're ugly, tells us we're not capable. There's ways to combat all of these. Fear of failure, I mentioned, avoidance coping. For anybody who just questioned what avoidance coping is, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this podcast while playing a fucking video game, yes, that's the thing. That is an avoidant coping skill. Playing video games for 6 hours a fucking day to avoid going outside and having anxiety from being in public spaces, from society at large, from dealing with your relationships, from dealing with your emotional pain. That's an avoidant coping skill.
Avoiding getting a tan. Avoiding touching grass.
Yeah. Drug use can be an avoidant coping skill as well. For any of you who are listening to this episode and doing math. Not that you would while you're doing math. I mean, this is probably way less entertaining than math. But
subscribing to too many OnlyFans.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, if you're listening to this and also masturbating, please stop. Just right now, please stop. Anyway, criticism, whether it be self-criticism or the criticism you give on to others and other things. So one thing I noticed from the nerdy community, and I know a lot of us are a lot of autistic people are part of that community. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I've got some allergies kicking. Anyway, I know a lot of folks that happen to be like nerdy, dorky folk, and I'm part of that community too. And I used to do it a great deal too. We have a tendency to watch, do, and participate in things just to criticize the fuck out of it. Like the first words out of our mouth are not the positive things about something or the benefits of something.
You mean like comic book guy from The Simpsons?
Yes. Immediately just shits on it just to shit on it to begin with.
Worst comic book movie ever.
Yeah. And you can believe it's the worst comic book movie ever, but how about start with an honest, neutral evaluation opposed to just shitting on something to begin with?
Rey was a character in the new Star Wars.
Yeah. Rey was a character.
Yeah. That's my positive take.
Yeah,
Rey was a character.
Daisy Ridley. She's a good actress.
I didn't say anything about Daisy Ridley.
All right, then.
I said Rey.
Yeah. The character of Rey.
Yeah. I didn't like the new Star Wars movies.
I know you didn't like them, and that's okay. By the way, criticism in this regard is not a matter of you like or dislike and you voice that opinion. It's when you're shitting on something so hardcore. So when like people heard of
I thought the writing was bad.
Feedback, that's a fancy way of saying fucking criticism. Okay. And I know I'm swearing further into the episode we get, the more I'm swearing. When I'm talking about this criticism, think about how you describe yourself. Okay. If you write down on a piece of paper the first 5 words to describe yourself, and all of 5 of them are negative, and they progressively get more negative or more critical or harsher, that's what the kind of self-criticism I'm talking about, that's self-sabotaging. Because you cannot overcome your own inner voice if your own inner voice is just highly shitting on you. If there's no positive inner voice and it's just shitting on you, and it's like it's stopping you and preventing you from being able to move forward with what you want to do, that's a bad thing. Anyway, desire of control, I said. Gaslighting is self-sabotaging behavior. Addiction, I pointed out. Overthinking. And yes, ADHD people, yes, you overthink a lot, but this is when it's self-sabotaging to overthink. Being the assumer. Constantly assuming the outcome of shit, whether you know what the actual outcome will be or not. And no, you don't know the future, so please stop fortune telling. Lacking in moderation. This is a huge issue. It kind of ties into some of the other ones that I talked about, like addiction, a lack of moderation. Overbuying sneakers to the point where you can't pay rent, self-sabotaging behavior. People pleasing, worrying too much about the opinions of others. Being obsessed with the opinions of others, false beliefs of self or others, automatically assuming shit about them. Othering people is self-sabotaging behavior. Okay. They're not like me because they're X. Okay. Mind reading, fear of happiness. And the last one is imposter syndrome. Yep. So imposter syndrome is a really big deal in our community, especially if you're self-diagnosed. A lot of people who are self-diagnosed for autism have tendency to be imposter syndrome. So look into that and how it affects you. All of these are really important, and we could probably spend the next 9.5 days going over self-sabotaging behavior and stuff, but I think we should move on a little bit. Where does it come from? Okay. So instead of engaging in a longer conversation about it, where does it come from? A lot of it comes from trauma. A lot of it comes from the way we were brought up and the way we were taught to view ourselves and view the world around us. So a lot of it comes from that. A lot of it just comes from basic, like our thinking. So there's a lot of these things called cognitive distortions, which we'll talk about in another episode. Cognitive distortions can fuck us up. Now, I know a bunch of my autistic folk, especially those who go on social media a lot, have heard that autistic people have black and white thinking, okay, or all or nothing thinking. All humans engage in that, by the way. And yes, it is more predominant for autistic folk because of how finite it is, but that can affect us a great deal and create self-sabotaging behaviors, okay, when we allow that thinking to then make decisions for us. Do you have anything to add to that, or should I go? Yep. The last thing I'm going to bring up is like, what can a person do about it? One, and I'm always going to be a huge advocate for people to go to therapy. Always, I'm going to advocate for people to go to therapy and get to know themselves, become more self-aware of what self-sabotaging behaviors you do and don't do to yourself. And also, something you can do about it is, stop being an asshole. Like, understand the effect you're having on yourself and others. Like, stop blaming the rest of the world for you.
Stop avoiding your responsibilities.
Yeah. I mean, honest to God, stop avoiding your responsibilities.
Clean your room.
Accountable. Yeah. Take fucking accountability. I know I'm getting a little harsher on this, but like, honest to God, a lot of self-sabotaging behaviors are a result of you wanting to avoid how you fucking feel, how you blame somebody else for the way you feel.
That's right, George Lucas. Come back to Star Wars because we need you.
Yeah, motherfucker.
Take responsibility for your... I'm just kidding.
Right. But a lot of these behaviors, like, and the things we do to fuck up our own existence in our life is because we're not taking accountability for our own emotions, our own choices, our own actions, and we're putting it off on somebody else. But going to therapy can help us sift through that and be able to move forward from some of this stuff, from some of the traumas that we've experienced in life, some of the disorders that we carry with us. I mean, I myself have bipolar as well, right? And I've talked about it before. It affects me a great deal, depending on whether I'm manic or I'm depressed. It affects me differently, and I have to be aware of that stuff. So it's a constant battle and struggle to identify what episode I'm in and how it's affecting me day to day. And sometimes I mess that up and I make choices that are not in my best interest. But other things we can do is make sure we're as informed as we can about the things that affect us, our self-sabotaging behaviors. And something we can do is look at somebody in your life, whether it be your creative partner, your podcast partner, your actual intimate partner, a good friend of yours, your mama, your brother, your cousin,
your
sister.
howdy partner, do-si-do.
Exactly.
Grab your partner, swing her left and right.
Ask them what things about your behavior, okay, they think are affecting them. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean you have to change what they say, but at least it's an outside perspective of things that you might not be aware of that you're doing, like controlling behavior, people-pleasing behavior. You might not know that that's what you're actually doing. You might just say to yourself, well, I'm a good person, so I help people. Okay, cool. But at what point do you say no? Oh, I never say no. Well, your buddy might be able to point that out to you. So anything else to add to that? I know I did a rush job on that, but I did it on purpose.
You didn't have to rush to it.
Well, I was trying to move things along a little bit, but it's the what can people do about it in your estimation? So I obviously come from everything.
I think
from
the biggest thing that people should do in general,
yeah,
and it will help with self-sabotaging, but it will help with anything in your life, is to take time to actually self-reflect. And people don't do that.
No, they don't.
Especially... And I know that this sounds like an old man talking point.
So should I say it?
Well, I was going to say because of technology. It's not just because of technology, because people avoid sitting with their own thoughts and self-reflection in other ways. I'm sure people like read books instead of self-reflecting back before the internet and technology and television. But those things have made it easier, right?
Yeah.
TV, we had television, then we had... they had radio, they had TV, we have the internet nowadays. There's more than ways than ever to constantly distract yourself because you have a device in your pocket.
Avoidance coping.
You have a device in your pocket where you can watch anything you want, look up anything you want, read, listen to anything you want, anytime you want. And so if I'm going for a walk down the street, I don't have to sit with my own thoughts. I can just distract myself.
Right. That can actually delude somebody into believing that there is a point of view that is more predominant in the community than it is.
You're taking a shower in the morning, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to think. You don't have to reflect. You can just listen to a podcast when in the shower. I'm just saying that, I'm not saying those things are bad.
Right.
Like playing video games, listening to a TV, radio, any of that stuff, listening to podcasts.
By no means is he saying turn off this podcast right now.
It's just
he's not saying that.
there's more, you have more opportunities more than ever, because it used to be at least some points in your day many years ago, you were forced to sit with your thoughts because you didn't have those instant gratification in your pocket. You didn't have something to pull out and just distract yourself and play a game. But no, people don't spend a lot of time sitting with their thoughts. So I think spending some time, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes a day, self-reflecting, thinking about your day, or thinking about things going on in your life and reflecting on it will help. That's
awesome.
All. That's all
I'm actually going to piggyback on what you're saying real quick. There's a comedian out there by the name of Neil Brennan who's got a podcast called Blocks. And on that podcast, he talks a lot about something he's been doing recently to help himself. And he does a gratitude list 5 times a day. He takes a couple of minutes and just jots down a couple things that he's grateful for 5 times a day. And I really think that that's super beneficial for anybody to do. And I'm not telling nobody to go out there and do what he's doing, but I just really like, and he said it really helps him put things in perspective and keeps himself focused on stuff throughout his day by sitting down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 times a day and writes down the things he is grateful for. I think it's a cool idea. I mean, I thought it was cool as shit, and I knew of the idea prior to that, but I thought it was really interesting that he was willing to tell people, this is what I do to keep myself sane. Which is a cool idea, right? I agree with you completely. And thank you for bringing that up. People need to sit with themselves a little bit more. A lot of people, and I'm included in this too, have a hard time sitting with themselves. I mean, I literally bought a Fold 3 just so I could open that screen up and watch TV more often. And
but doesn't that...
I turned it on in my car.
Doesn't that eventually make your anxiety and depression worse because you're never actually taking the time to work through anything in your head?
Yeah, I've actually found it beneficial, so I don't focus on my anxiety and depression.
But it is in the short term. But long term, I'm saying, doesn't it make, like, so for instance, if you have anxiety problems, is something that I've dealt with.
Yeah.
If I constantly try to distract myself from the anxiety, I'm never actually dealing with it.
I would say most people are just like that. I found it the more time I have to spend with myself, I find I get more depressed. I don't know why that is.
Maybe, but that's only if you're not taking steps to, like, I'm not saying that you can instantly fix anything that's causing depression or anxiety, but if there are things in your life that are causing anxiety,
right?
If you have time to sit and think about it, you can also try to make steps to make changes in your life that will alleviate some of that anxiety. But if you're doing the self-soothing behaviors or things to distract yourself, you're avoiding doing anything to make changes.
Right.
So if I know, like, I have a bunch of different things that are causing me concerns. Let's say you have health concerns, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I need to diet, I need to exercise, I need to eat better, whatever.
Right.
But instead of thinking about it, all you do, you're like, it's causing you anxiety, but instead of thinking about it or trying to come up with a plan to do any of those things, right?
Yeah,
Self-sabotage.
Yeah.
You just sit there and watch videos on your phone because I don't want to think about it.
I might have to think about that a little bit, because to me, the more time I spend thinking about my anxiety and depression, or my moments of anxiety and depression, or the things that are causing my anxiety and depression, the more I get bound by them. Or at least I find that I get bound by them more.
But that's why we avoid it by distracting ourselves. But but
I'm not avoiding doing things to help my depression.
It depends on what it is, because I don't know. I don't have specifics in your case. I'm just saying in my case, if there could be things that I could be doing to try to make my life better in some ways that would alleviate some of the anxiety or depression and things that I have, or things I don't like about myself. But I'm not. Instead, I'm distracting myself by playing a game so I don't have to think about it.
Oh, yeah, no. So my intent, or at least my conscious intent, is never to avoid my emotionality. So my depression. I never sit down to watch Big Bang Theory with the intent to make myself feel better because I get to laugh. There are times where I am stressed, where I don't want to watch a drama because I don't want to continue to feel that way, but I don't purposely set out to do something to not feel like. I never drink on a Friday night when we rehearse improv. I don't drink because I had a stressful day.
Yeah.
I never intend on a Saturday night to go out with you to get hammered so I can not feel anxiety of whatever, right? When me and you go out in public, do we sometimes have a drink or two to not feel as anxious? Yes, we do. And that's a coping skill, but I never go overboard for the most part. I don't go overboard when I go out and drink.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have, and actually recently a couple times I did, but majority of the time I don't go overboard. And
I'm just thinking like,
you know what I mean?
if you're worried about your health.
Yeah.
And
Oh, you mean like the heart monitor I'm wearing?
no, I wasn't saying that in particular. I just meant like, let's say you want to lose weight, for instance.
Yeah, which every now and again I look in the mirror and go, "Oh, I should probably lose some weight."
But you never make a plan to actually do it.
No, because I never actually want to.
Right. But I'm just saying.
Look, I'm okay with being.
I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm speaking in general.
I know. And I'm implying. It
So
onto me
instead of
specifically.
doing anything to lose weight, you just distract yourself because it's a lot of work. You're avoiding doing it.
Right.
You're like, I don't want to think about it, even though maybe it's not as hard as you think it is as far as the planning part.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
It's just that it's overwhelming. So you don't want to take the first steps, which is, all right, what's the first step? The first step is, all right, I need to, when I go to the grocery store, I need to like have a list of what I'm going to buy instead of just going and buying Cocoa Puffs. I go there and I'm like, all right, I'm going to get these things so I can meal prep instead of buying pizza for lunch. I'm going to like bring food with me or something. You know what I mean? Like
I completely know what you're talking about.
you're avoiding doing all that because like, I don't want to think about it.
Okay.
It's overwhelming. It's stressing me out. It's anxiety. I'm just going to.
The folks who say, I don't have any time for me. I don't have 5 minutes in my day to do what Steve said and try to reflect on my day or my week or my life. I don't even have 5 minutes in a day. I'm going to call bullshit and I'm going to prove to you right now that you do have 5 minutes in your day. Here's how. I want you to take a piece of paper and write down everything you do in your day and how long it takes you. And the 5 minutes you just spent writing down that list to try to prove to me you don't have 5 minutes, guess what? You just proved you have 5 minutes to do it. Every time you have more than 5 minutes of a conversation bitching about something, you have 5 minutes in a day that you can do something with.
I don't know. A lot of people spend
way more than that on social media.
Well, social media, watching TV. And it's not that those things are bad or distracting yourself or leisure time.
Yeah. It's when you're doing it too much. That's
but
a
you
problem.
can, instead of watching TV for 3 hours, watch TV for 2.5 and take half an hour to go for a walk or do something.
Yeah. Or write down on a piece of paper the things you enjoy about your day or the things you want to fix.
I find
how are you going to fix them?
Like working up the energy to go for a walk is worse than actually going for a walk.
It's completely true.
I go once I'm walking, I could walk for hours.
Yeah.
I could go for an hour-long walk around the city and I'm fine. But like the build up to doing it.
Yeah.
But once I'm there, I enjoy myself. I get the fresh air. It's nice out.
I do want to point out because the thought occurred to me because you're completely right, Steve. The build up, the anticipation of doing something is often more difficult than the doing. I do want to point out though that for some people, the doing is just as bad as the anticipation due to extra factors.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the activity is.
Yeah, I want to point out due to other things, there might be doing the activity might be just as bad. So pick a different activity.
Well, we're just speaking in general.
Yeah, we're trying to use general.
But I know for me, like, if I want to do something, right, sometimes I start to get stressed out by thinking about all the planning and the steps that I need to take to do it.
Right.
And so if I start to get annoyed or anxious or frustrated because I'm like, I don't feel like dealing with all this right now, I'll just go do something else because I don't want to think about it.
Well, so
it's sabotaging myself because I'm not doing the planning, but sometimes I just don't want to think about all of it. I don't want to organize and plan everything because I'm not organizing and planning stuff is very draining for me.
Right.
So I just avoid it. But if I don't plan, then when I try to do things, I'm setting myself up for failure.
Social events for you.
Like if I don't have a plan for like trying to eat healthy or lose weight, then I end up just not eating and not doing the things that I wanted to do. Or same thing, if you go buy a bunch of groceries because you're planning on eating healthier, but then you don't plan out time to actually cook all the stuff and meal prep, then you end up, it's a waste.
Right. And some people at that point give up and they're like, well, I just don't have the time to do it. And that might be true for some people, but for the vast majority of us, we could actually do better meal prep and probably eat healthier.
But like if you're gonna spend half an hour to an hour cooking a meal anyway, even if you cook a meal once a week, even if you only cook one night a week, instead of spending half an hour or 20 minutes prepping and like half an hour cooking, so about an hour, right? you spend maybe an extra 10 or 20 minutes and cook for the whole week.
Right.
So you're
For
giving
some
a little
of
bit
us.
extra more time, and now you've meal prepped for the whole week because it's still going to take you the same amount of time to cook everything.
Right.
It might take a little more time to prep the ingredients,
That's
and then it
true.
takes a little more time to put the ingredients into containers.
Yeah.
But it's really not that much extra work.
I would like to point out, like, because me and Natalie,
But
after
the thought about it is more complicated than the actual task.
after me and you's conversation the other day about food and meal prep and all that and buying food and all that stuff, I was talking to Natalie about it, and we talked about, like, what if we just made up more food, on the weekend and for the week, right? And then we started looking at Tupperware containers and literally the size of our fridge,
Yeah.
and went, we have 5 human beings to feed. And like, we actually took a bunch of our Tupperware containers. Now, we don't have a crap ton of Tupperware containers. We'd have to buy more, but we started putting them on the middle shelf.
Yeah.
And realized that we might not have a good enough size fridge.
You
for
also
the
have
5 people
you
in
guys
our
have
house.
like an older style fridge
Yeah, we do.
too.
We have a smaller, older fridge.
If you had like one of those more modern like stainless steel fridges,
Yeah.
you probably have enough room.
We probably would. I'm just pointing out that, like, with what we have
Yeah.
right now, we don't.
Mine's even smaller than yours.
Yes, it is. Like, we don't physically have the room for 5 human beings to meal prep with, right? We would have to do it on a daily kind of thing, and that becomes more problematic.
Or what
especially
I
with
used to do
3
is
kids in the house and all that kind
Well,
of stuff.
here's what I would do in your situation, and what I don't know if it would work for you, but
Me neither.
sometimes I make like a big one pot thing.
Yep.
I'll do like quinoa with vegetables and like meat,
Sure.
right? So or rice and vegetables and meat, whatever. Have a big pot of like this rice meat food mixture.
Yeah.
You just leave the pot in the fridge and then you scoop it out that day and put it in the container.
Yeah, yeah. You know which one of the 5 of us would have the biggest issue with that.
All you gotta do is boop, in the container. There you go.
You know which one of the 5 of us would have the biggest problem with a big pot of soup and putting what you just described, quinoa and kale and veggies.
It doesn't have to be all that. It can be
you know
just
who would
like
have a
rice and
problem with
beans
that.
and meat. I know you don't like rice, but
Well, I don't. That's a personal thing to me. But I was talking about a certain person who, has a problem with differences and certain textures.
Oh.
I'm talking about Becky. Come on, dude. By the way, like we have a higher support need autistic person in our household, and yes, a lot of decisions are built around her willingness.
or she doesn't like
of
she
certain
doesn't
things.
like rice and beans and stuff.
No,
like that,
she
or-
digs rice. She doesn't like beans all that much.
Yeah.
And like, depending on what day it is, depends on how the chicken might need to be prepared.
Yeah, I think I would have a hard time with like structuring everybody's meals around one person.
But that's part of why we don't 100% do it that way. We make a separate thing for her.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Like chicken nuggets.
Not always. Sometimes we do other things but that becomes problematic in itself because we have to make X number of meals separately for her compared to the other 4. And so then that in itself, like, we've got to buy.
I'm sure her
extra food
her
for that.
palate will expand as she continues to get older.
I mean, she is also 15, and yes, since I've been there, living there, right? So about 8 years, she has expanded what foods she'll eat and how often and what they are often, right?
I've heard her like shove stuff in her mouth and just go ew and take it out.
Oh yeah. Oh God.
I was like, you didn't even taste it. She just didn't like the texture or something.
So there was one day, Natalie cut up a bunch of carrots, right? Just cut them in half, put them on a plate, put ranch next to it, right? She loved the crap out of it. Becky just dug out, nom, 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 right? The very next day, she put the exact same thing, and guess what she did? She dipped it in the ranch, put it in her mouth, and went, ew, that's icky. Like, really? You just chowed down on it like a bastard yesterday, and now today, it's icky and horrible, and she never wants it again, right? And then like a month later, she ate it again. But that's like, some people would see that as like 5 or 6 year old behavior, because that's, sometimes that's what younger people have tendency to do too.
So we're gonna make a chicken nugget casserole. How's that?
Yeah, well, I mean,
make a one pot of nuggets.
Yeah. Like, honest to God,
Meal prep
like,
nuggets with mac and cheese.
When you said make, one thing and then you just scoop it out for the week, I was thinking about like, what kind of casseroles could we make for Becky?
Yeah.
Like what kind of
Throw
things
one
could we
pot
do?
mac and cheese with dino chicken nuggets.
Yeah. You know what? Anybody who's got a high support needs autistic kid,
Velveeta with nuggets.
you know what we're talking about.
Velveeta with dino nuggies sticking out.
I'm not saying I dislike that for myself, let alone for her. But
It's
anyway,
like
I don't
a-
eat very well for myself.
It's like a poor man's version of buffalo mac and cheese.
That's
you know?
right. That's yes. Like you say, poor man's version. I'm saying the more creative version.
It's dino nuggets thrown on top of Velveeta. Nick.
Yeah,
That's
they're
not really
creative and fun. They're dino nuggets.
It's box mac
Yeah.
with frozen nuggets on top.
Yeah,
How creative is that?
they're shaped like dinosaurs.
Okay, I'll let Gordon Ramsay be the judge of that now.
Yeah, please. You know what? And if Gordon Ramsay had a high support needs kid, actually, no, Gordon Ramsay has enough money and talent. He could make an awesome meal for an autistic
Or you could
kid.
just have a chef or have somebody who just makes stuff for his autistic kid.
Yeah,
that point.
he could pay somebody to do that.
Like
I
have
can't
a
pay
maid
for
or a
that.
butler who does it.
Yeah, I can't pay for that. But anyway, so moving on. By the way, a lot of what we're talking about can be constituted as self-sabotaging behavior because could I put in a little bit more effort into getting Becky into eating more different types of foods and whatnot? Sure. Is it really difficult? And anybody who's an autistic
Because she's probably not
parent-
going to make that effort herself.
Right. Well, she won't make that effort herself.
Just, hey, try it.
Yeah.
And then over time.
Yeah, like we can't put a random thing on her plate that she's never had before and expect her to just try. And anybody who's got an autistic kid, you know full well what I'm
And
talking
if
about.
it's
and
on the plate
struggle
with
it.
stuff she will eat, then she
Yes.
might not eat the other stuff because that other thing's on the
Yes,
plate.
that is exactly true. She might not touch anything on that plate at all because that new thing is there.
It's like, that's a bratwurst.
Right.
I don't want that.
Yeah,
I
and
want a
so
hot
we have
dog.
to have to get rid of the whole plate. And when I say get rid of, I usually mean I eat it. We'll get rid of the whole plate and we have to put new shit on the plate minus that thing she doesn't want to touch. Yeah.
It's a hot dog. That's not a hot dog. It's a
Oh.
bratwurst. No, it's a hot dog.
Dude, if you could put 2 beef hot dogs on that plate next to each other, and if they are made by 2 different brands, she will know, and she will not touch the one she's never had before.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, it is a struggle. It is difficult sometimes, but I would never give up Becky to save anything in the world because there are wonderful days where she will be in her own head doing her own scripty thing. She will come and sit down on the couch. She will put her arm around mine in the middle of scripting whatever it is she's watching, but she'll wrap her arm around mine. And that by itself, she knows I'm there and she loves me. And it's a wonderful, wonderful fucking feeling. And then there are moments where she's yelling and screaming because she lost her phone, even though her phone is sitting on the bed in front of her. There are those moments that are really grating on my nerves, and any autistic parent can back me up on that. It can be very, very grating when they're having a meltdown and stuff because it's very hard. At the same time, I no longer want to inhibit her meltdowns or try to pacify the meltdown. I kind of let her have them. But it can be really grating on my own sensory, audio sensory.
Well, I think maybe you should just control your child. So
I know that sarcasm from you. and
I will-
I just find it
I'm going to get a
hilarious.
straight jacket chair.
Oh my good
You
god!
just,
Is
straps
it-
around
is
the
it
arms.
similar to your autism acupuncture chair?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the autism cure, I'm on version 3.0. The first 2 didn't stick with Nick. He got better for a week or so, started to regress.
Yeah, I'm always going to.
Regression.
I actually had somebody at work actually say, I know you say you're autistic, but I watched one of your clips and I how are you autistic? And I went, well, that's kind of between me and my doctor to know. And, you just accept the fact I said it. And they were like, well, no, I'm trying to understand, like, how were you and one of our clients the same? And I said, well, we're actually not the same. We just have the same diagnosis. And actually on that, we don't have the same diagnosis. We're just part of the same spectrum, right? And they were having a really hard time understanding how there are things about me or, I am autistic because all they see in the clip was just me joking with you and stuff. And I was getting sarcasm because I also
it's like,
know Steve.
here's a physical example.
Yeah.
I am colorblind, but colorblindness isn't what most people think it is. There's different,
Yeah.
it's really color deficiency.
Mhm.
And most people have color deficiencies as red or green. Some people have blue, but that's rare.
Oh.
And then some people can only see in black and white, but that's extremely rare. Most people just have a red or green deficiency and they're missing certain receptors. So I can see red and I just can't see certain shades of red. That's
Right.
mainly what I have a problem is certain hues of red because I'm missing some red receptors.
Mhm.
But comparing me to somebody who's completely colorblind, or that's like comparing me to somebody who's blind,
Right.
So there's differences. I still have colorblindness, but my colorblindness isn't the same as somebody who has a blue deficiency. So when you're comparing people on the spectrum, I know this is not the greatest analogy, but
Well, I actually like this analogy better than people saying if you met one autistic, you met one autistic.
well, it's because people have it. It seems like it's easier for people to understand when you put it in terms of like a physical disability versus something that's harder for them to see.
Right. Well, it's easier for neurotypicals.
Although they can't really see my colorblindness either, but
Right. But it's also easier for autistic people I think to conceptualize what you're talking about than just saying if you met one autistic, you met one autistic. Because quite honestly, I've always interpreted that to mean none of us have autism. We're all just different folk. And I don't like that either. That's personal opinion. Don't yell at Steve for that one. That's just me.
he has internalized ableism.
No, it's a matter of like, we are all autistic and we know we're all autistic because we match some fucking criteria that all identify us as being similar somehow. And so saying if you met one autistic, you met one autistic, you're literally saying there's nothing similar about each of us. And there is something that makes us similar. We are autistic. And there are specific things that we know that makes up autism. Whether if you want to take that to the biological, you want to talk about it behaviorally, there are things we all do similarly enough to make us in the range of autism spectrum. I just want to point that out. And I understand the point behind if you met one autistic, you met one autistic. It's meant to be said to a neurotypical person to kind of make sure that people aren't making assumptions about us. I just dislike the damn phrase because of the other implication of it.
All right. Well, I hope
yeah.
you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned
did.
a little bit about self-sabotage.
I did.
And we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And please give us feedback. Tell us what you liked, disliked. Tell us if you think we're right or wrong. And please engage us in conversation. We appreciate that.
And don't forget to vote for poo-poo 24.
Yep. Please do not forget to vote. Poo-poo 2024. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.